Colorado's marijuana industry racked up $2.4 billion in 2015, according to a marijuana policy group report released this week. The report also found that marijuana is expected to surpass tobacco excise revenue numbers by 2020. David, for a long time we've known marijuana as a major industry in Colorado, but this is the first time we started to talk about among the big players. When you're talking about tobacco excise revenue in 2020 being competitive with marijuana revenue, I'm not sure if most Coloradans were thinking that way. Does this surprise you? Do you see changes on policies because of this revelation?
Well, one of the changes in policies is the government's going to have more money to do constructive things for the public, because now that they brought marijuana out of the shadows and made it something that's highly taxed, a lot of money's coming in, and they've also been able to reduce spending on, locking up people for small level marijuana offenses, which nationally, marijuana arrests outnumbered all arrests for violent crime in the United States, which I think is a gross misallocation of finite resources. It's not just, though, that the marijuana is going up. It's that tobacco use is going down, and it's not all because people are switching from Lucky Strikes to, Duck-Hind gummy bears or whatever, which is, by the way, a healthier switch. It's like drinking beer and having beer instead of meth for your relaxation in terms of the health effects. But it's also vaping is huge. And what vaping is it's basically inhaling eggplant vapor. Nicotine occurs naturally in eggplants. It's extracted, and then vaping is it's not burning. A cigarette is combustion. You're not burning anything, but you're heating something up, so it produces a vapor that people inhale, and they get the pure nicotine, which is not a health problem, without all the terrible other things in cigarettes, such as tars and all that other stuff. Unfortunately, the Obama administration is trying to crush this very important public health development by imposing regulations on vaping manufacturers, which will drive all of the small ones out of business, because it's impossible for the small ones to comply, which means the benefits. The winners are the companies like Philip Morris, which are moving into vaping. And of course, they love high and oppressive regulation because they've got the legal departments and the money to comply with all that. So I hope the administration stops its war on eggplants.
I think the price for eggplants is about to skyrocket in Colorado based on the analysis heard at this table. Eric, do you expect any changes in communities based on the growing economic power of marijuana?
I don't know about you, Dominic. I had eggplant in my CIO bingo today, so thank you. Thank you, David. We will see, in answer to your question of whether there are local impacts. I think one thing that we're going to sort out in this state, and the public is ultimately going to be heard from and sorted out over, starting in this election coming up in 10 or 11 days and then over the next couple of years, is have we made peace as a state with marijuana, but we want to keep it sort of within constraints, or do we want to further expand its presence in the state? I think the Initiative 300 vote in Denver will be an indicator. It's not going to be the final indicator. It's not going to be the final say on that, but it will be an indicator. Clearly, marijuana, as the numbers speak for themselves, is having a major impact on this state in all kinds of ways, culturally, socially, and in terms of the fiscal impact of tax revenues. I will go back to my statement. This was a couple of weeks after the law went into effect several years ago, after Amendment 64 took effect. And the question was, is this a success? You can't evaluate this just by tax revenues. You can't evaluate it just by how smoothly this goes. This will be a public health evaluation that is made 10 or 20 years from now in terms of the impact on marijuana on this state. Even though we're now 2 or 3 years into this, it is way too early to make that conclusive judgment.
Penn, the legislature is used to seeing lobbying from a lot of different groups, big and small industries. But when you can say you have $2.4 billion as an industry, will the marijuana industry have a stronger lobbying charge at the legislature?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. The marijuana industry is now big business. It's sitting at the table with some of the CenturyLinks and Excels and some of the other major players in this state. The difficulty is that I still think we have a significant segment of the population that's not quite at ease with the whole idea of marijuana, whether for medicinal or personal use. So I still think that needs to be resolved. Initiative 300 in Denver is going to be a very interesting vote. I am, at this point, expecting it's going to lose because I still think people are saying it's all right if you use, but we don't know if we want public places where there's consumption. And so this is going to be a push and pull. We'll see for a while. And as we've talked about before, I think some of the proponents will not stop until basically you can consume marijuana like you consume liquor in a bar.
Patty, I figured on this news that you had a very large thank you note because I don't think the marijuana industry gets anywhere in this community without the work that Westward has done. Were you surprised to see these numbers?
No, if you've been tracking it, it's not a surprise. What we need to know is how other legalization efforts will affect this. 5 states have it on their ballot next week, on November 8th. So California, Arizona, Nevada, they all look like they'll probably pass. So we'll see. I think 300 will pass because when people voted for Amendment 64, they at least thought they didn't really think about what would happen to tourists visiting or people on the street, what they're going to do. So it makes more sense to kind of set up a social club the way bars work. And of course, you can't smoke in a bar, so you're not going to be able to smoke pot, except you can vape things other than eggplant, I'd like to point out to David.